I thought I was just doing my job, but I was mothering the child I once lost. My name is Melissa, I'm 38 years old, and this is the story of how I unknowingly became the nanny to my own daughter, the one I was forced to give up at birth. I was barely 18 when it happened. You know how it is in small, conservative towns, everyone talks, everyone judges. My parents were horrified when I got pregnant. The father? A guy who bolted the second he found out. I was scared and stupid and had no one on my side. My mother told me we were going on a trip. That trip was to some quiet clinic outside of town where girls like me went to quietly deliver and give their babies away. I remember the white walls, the nurses with cold hands, and the way no one looked me in the eye. They didn't have to say it out loud. I wasn't meant to see her, hold her, or name her. As soon as she was born, she was gone. I tried to block it up for years. My parents acted like it never happened. They sent me off to college as if I hadn't just gone through the most traumatic thing of my life. And maybe, in some twisted way, I let them. Because talking about it meant feeling it. And that hurt too much. Fast forward 20 years. I'd moved to another city. Built a life. Not perfect, but mine. I worked in a daycare for a while, then started doing private childcare. Families liked me. I was calm, dependable, nurturing, probably because some part of me was still aching to mother a child. Any child. So when I got a call from a woman named Claire about looking after her 10-year-old daughter, I didn't hesitate. We met at a Starbucks. Claire was polished, friendly, maybe a little anxious. She said they'd just moved to town and needed someone trustworthy. The job paid well, and her daughter, Emily, seemed sweet. Shy, with big brown eyes and dimples that appeared when she smiled. From the first moment I met Emily, something stirred in me. I brushed it off at first. Maybe it was just that she reminded me of what I never got to have. I didn't want to read into it. That's dangerous. But still, there was something in the way she looked at me. Something in how she leaned into my touch, how she sat a little closer than most kids do. I told myself it was just a bond forming. But deep down, something was shifting. Emily and I settled into a quiet routine. I picked her up from school, helped with her homework, made her snacks, and read to her before bed when Claire had to stay late at work. It was the kind of calm, day-to-day care I'd always dreamed of giving, but never had the chance. And Emily, God, she was special. She had this way of watching people, like she saw more than she let on. One day, she asked if I liked working with kids. I told her, yeah, I do. Especially when they're as sweet as you. She smiled, then looked down and whispered, "You feel like someone I used to know." It hit me harder than I expected. I laughed it off at the time, said something like, maybe we knew each other in another life. But later that night, I lay awake thinking about it. That odd ache in my chest wouldn't go away. Claire wasn't around much. She traveled a lot for work, corporate something, she never really explained. She didn't seem particularly maternal, if I'm honest. She was polite, paid on time, but distant. Sometimes, I'd catch her staring at Emily with this strange look, like discomfort. I chalked it up to stress. Or maybe she just didn't know how to connect with her daughter the way I did. One weekend, Claire had a last-minute work trip and asked if I could stay over. I said yes, of course. Emily was thrilled. That Saturday, we made pancakes in the morning, her idea. She added way too many chocolate chips and ended up with syrup all over her hair. We laughed so hard. I even took a picture. Something about her smile made me want to keep the moment forever. Later that evening, I was helping her with a craft project for school. She was cutting out old family photos for a collage. Suddenly, she held up a baby picture and asked, "Do you think I looked like this when I was born?" I froze. It was the kind of picture adoption agencies usually give to parents, one studio photo, neatly labeled, with a date on the back. And when I looked closer, I noticed something. The date. It matched the exact day I gave birth. My heart skipped. Of course, it could have been a coincidence. Babies are born every day. But my fingers trembled when I held the photo. Emily didn't notice. She kept gluing it to the paper, humming quietly. That night, while she slept, I sat in the living room staring at that photo album Claire had left open. The more I flipped through the pages, the more my stomach turned. No pregnancy photos. No newborn pictures with Claire in them. Just Emily, starting at a few weeks old. No documentation. No story. Just her. Could it really be? I didn't want to believe it. Because if it were true, if this girl was my daughter, then I'd been living in the middle of a lie without knowing it. And the biggest question was, had Claire known all along? I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that baby photo. That little face, round cheeks, tiny dimple on the left side, looked so much like the image I'd carried in my head for years. Maybe it was just in my imagination. Maybe I was projecting, hoping. But deep down, I knew. I knew. The next morning, I stood in Claire's kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee I wasn't drinking. Emily was still asleep upstairs, and the house was dead quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. My eyes kept darting to the hallway closet. I remembered seeing a metal lockbox inside the day I'd helped Claire search for Emily's missing stuffed giraffe. She'd snapped at me not to open it. Said it was just old taxes. God, what if it wasn't? I don't know what came over me. My heart was hammering in my chest as I knelt and opened the closet. The box was still there. Locked, of course. But I noticed the key taped under the shelf above it. Almost like she thought hiding it in plain sight was enough. I unlocked the box with shaky hands. Inside, a small stack of envelopes, a folder labeled Adoption, and a USB stick. I pulled out the folder first. The adoption papers were there, but the birth mother's name had been blacked out with permanent marker. Still, the birth date matched. So did the hospital. My hospital. And then I saw it. A copy of a letter, my letter, the one I'd written to my baby before I signed the papers. I'd tucked it into her blanket before they took her away. I remembered every word. And now, here it was, in Claire's hands. That's when it hit me like a punch to the gut. Claire hadn't adopted a random child. She'd adopted my child. She knew. I sat back on the floor, dizzy, my palms sweaty against the cold tile. I felt sick. Numb. Angry. Betrayed. I mean, how could she not tell me? How could anyone hide something so enormous? I'd been her nanny for months, caring for Emily every day, and she let me live in ignorance. Was this some kind of test? Was she just waiting to see if I figured it out? When Claire came home that night, I couldn't look at her the same. She poured a glass of wine, asked how things had gone. I nodded, barely able to form words. I was afraid if I spoke, I'd scream. That night, I watched Emily sleep for hours. Her chest rising and falling, peaceful. I sat on the edge of her bed and whispered, "I'm your mother." The words felt foreign. Terrifying. But real. The next day, I called in sick. I needed space. I took a long walk through the park, the cold biting my cheeks, leaves crunching under my boots. And I asked myself over and over, what was I supposed to do now? Tell Claire I knew? Tell Emily? Walk away? Stay silent? And I guess this is the part where I want to ask you. What would you do if you found out the child you gave up was living right under your nose, loving you, trusting you, without knowing who you really were? Would you speak up? Or would you stay quiet to protect them? I didn't go back to Claire's house for 2 days. I told her I wasn't feeling well, which, to be fair, wasn't entirely a lie. I couldn't sleep. I barely ate. I just kept pacing around my tiny apartment, staring at my phone, rereading that letter in my head over and over again. And when I finally went back, everything felt off. Claire greeted me like usual, "Hey, feeling better?" With her perfect smile and her designer blouse, acting like everything was normal. But it wasn't. Not for me. Emily ran to me, arms outstretched, squealing "Emma," and burying her face in my coat. And God, I almost broke. My arms wrapped around her automatically, like muscle memory. She smelled like strawberries and crayons. I kissed the top of her head and blinked back tears. Claire didn't notice, at least, I don't think she did. She was already back on the phone, talking loudly about some charity gala she was planning. Just like always. That afternoon, I sat on the floor with Emily, helping her with a puzzle. She turned to me at one point, her little brow furrowed, and said, "Emma, do you have a mommy?" I froze. Just completely blinked. "I did," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "A long time ago." Emily looked at me like she was trying to figure out if I was telling the truth. Then she nodded, like she understood, and placed another puzzle piece. It took everything in me not to cry. Later that night, when Claire left for her Pilates class, I found myself alone in the kitchen. My hands were shaking as I opened that lockbox again. I don't even know why I did it. I already knew what was inside. But this time, I opened the USB drive. And what I saw made everything worse. There were photos, videos, a digital diary Claire had kept during the adoption process. Notes about me. About how Emma is young and scared but deeply kind. I don't think she knows what a gift she's giving. God. I felt like someone had kicked the air out of my lungs. She had known me. She remembered me. And not once had she said anything. That night, I sat on the park bench outside my apartment for over an hour, watching the city lights blur behind tears. I kept thinking, if she thought I was kind, if she truly believed I was giving a gift, why didn't she ever reach out? Why didn't she ever tell me Emily was here? That she was safe, happy, loved? Instead, I found out like this. On accident. In silence. And now, everything I felt was tangled love, rage, sorrow, guilt. Was it wrong of me to want her back? Was it selfish? I mean, I'd signed the papers. I made that choice. No one forced me. But I didn't know Claire would be her mother. I didn't know my child would grow up 5 miles from where I lived, calling me Emma instead of Mom. It's easy to say what the right thing to do is when you're not the one standing in the middle of it. But now that I'm here, I don't know. Have you ever been torn between your heart and what you think is right? Because that's where I was right there, sitting in the dark, wondering if I even had a right to feel this broken. I wasn't even sure why I showed up to work the next morning. Maybe routine. Maybe guilt. Maybe just the thought of seeing Emily again. I don't know. I stood outside Claire's house for a full minute before ringing the doorbell, just breathing, trying to steady my hands. When she opened the door, she looked a little surprised. "Hey," she said, brushing hair behind her ear, "you sure you're okay? You've been out for a few days." I just nodded. Yeah, just needed time. She didn't press. That's the thing with Claire. She's so used to people managing their own problems. She never asks too many questions. Or maybe she didn't want the answers. I went upstairs to find Emily already dressed, sitting on her bed, flipping through a picture book. When she saw me, her whole face lit up. "You came back," she squealed, jumping up. I smiled. Of course I did. I missed you. And I meant it. I missed her more than I thought was possible. We spent the morning building a pillow fort in the living room. Emily kept calling it our castle, and at one point, she handed me a sparkly plastic crown and said, "You can be the queen, Emma." That broke me a little. After lunch, while Emily napped, I finally sat Claire down. My heart was pounding. My palms were sweaty, and I couldn't make eye contact. "There's something I need to ask you," I said. "And I need you to be honest with me." Claire narrowed her eyes. "Okay. That lockbox in your closet." I saw the letter. The adoption papers. The photo. There was a pause, just a second, but it felt like an hour. Claire set her wine glass down slowly. "I see. You knew it was me. You knew I was her mother this whole time." Claire exhaled, her shoulders slumping. She didn't deny it. Didn't try to pretend. "Yes. I knew," she said. "From the very beginning." I stared at her, waiting for more. Some kind of explanation. Something that would make this feel less like betrayal and more like, "I don't know, a mistake." "I didn't tell you," she went on, "because I didn't think you were ready to know. You were young. You were hurting. I didn't want to reopen that wound." "You reopened it the moment you hired me," I said. "You let me live in your house. Take care of my own child. Without telling me the truth." Claire was quiet. "I watched you with her, Emma. From the first day. You were gentle, patient. It was like you already loved her." "Because I did," I whispered. "Because I do." She nodded. "And that scared me." I stood up, shaking. "You should have told me. You should have given me the choice." "You gave her up," she said softly. "I didn't want to confuse her." God, that line. It felt like a slap. I had given her up. I'd signed the papers. But I didn't give up the love. The ache. The need to know she was okay. Claire looked at me, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked vulnerable. "I'm sorry," she said. "Truly. But I thought I was protecting everyone." I left the house that night without saying goodbye to Emily. I couldn't. If I had, I would have told her everything. And I wasn't ready. Not yet. But I knew one thing now. I couldn't keep pretending this was just a job. I was her mother. And somehow, some way, that had to mean something. I didn't sleep that night. I kept staring at the ceiling, my mind running circles around what Claire had said. "You gave her up." Over and over. Like a cruel little echo that refused to leave me alone. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in a very long time. I called my mother. We hadn't spoken in years, not since the whole adoption thing. I knew she didn't approve. I mean, she practically pushed me into giving Emily up. But I needed answers. I don't know, some kind of clarity. She picked up on the third ring. "Emma?" Her voice was cautious, like she wasn't sure whether to be warm or distant. "Hi," I said. "I know it's been a while." There was a long pause. Then, "Are you okay?" I almost laughed. "No, not really." We agreed to meet for coffee that afternoon. A little place near her house, nothing fancy, just a quiet corner cafe with wooden booths and that overly sweet cinnamon smell that brought back too many memories. When she saw me, her eyes widened. "You look tired." "Gee, thanks." I gave a half smile. We sat. I stirred my tea so much the spoon clinked nonstop against the ceramic. She didn't say anything until I finally blurted it out. "I found her. Emily. The girl I gave up." She froze. "You what?" "She's 9. Her name's Emily. She lives with Claire. Claire's the one who hired me." Her mouth fell open slightly. That's unbelievable." She knew. The whole time. Claire knew I was Emily's birth mother. And she didn't say a word. My mother's expression shifted. "Emma, you need to be careful. This could get messy. You signed those papers. You made that choice." "I was 19. I snapped. "You know that. You were the one who said it was for the best. That I couldn't raise a child on my own." My mom's shoulders slumped. I didn't know what else to do. God. Hearing that? I don't know why, but it made me want to scream. All those years I thought she was sure. That I was the failure. But now she's saying she didn't know either? I left without finishing my tea. That evening, I walked around the park near my apartment, the air sharp with autumn, leaves crunching under my boots. I kept seeing Emily's face. Her smile. The way she said, "You can be the queen." And I just kept thinking, how do you go back to being nothing once you've felt what it's like to be everything to your child, even for a moment? I know I signed those papers. I know the law. I know what I gave up. But something in me had changed. Tell me something. Have you ever held something so precious, so close, and then had to pretend it wasn't yours? How do you survive that kind of silence? I didn't know what the next step was. But I knew I couldn't stay still. The next morning, I stood in front of my closet for 15 minutes, just staring. Not because I had nothing to wear, but because I had no idea who I was dressing for anymore. For the first time in a long time, it wasn't for a boss or a boyfriend or even myself. It was for a little girl who thought I was a queen. I chose a soft blue sweater. Emily had once said blue was her favorite color and pulled my hair back into a loose braid. I don't know. Maybe I wanted to look motherly, whatever that means. When I arrived at Claire's house that afternoon, my heart was pounding like it wanted out of my chest. She opened the door before I even knocked. "Hey," she said softly. I nodded. "Can we talk?" She stepped aside. "Of course." We sat in the sunroom. The same room where I'd read stories to Emily, where she'd once fallen asleep in my lap. Claire handed me a cup of tea, her usual chamomile. I stared at it for a moment before setting it down. "I'm not here to fight," I said. "I know." I looked her straight in the eye. "But I need to know, why didn't you tell me?" She swallowed. "I wanted to. I swear. But I didn't know how. And then you were so good with her, so natural." I was scared. "Of what?" I asked. "That I'd try to take her away?" Claire's voice cracked. "No. That she'd want you more than me." God. That hit harder than I expected. I exhaled, studying my voice. Claire, I don't want to take Emily from you. You're her mother. You've raised her, loved her, given her everything. I'm not here to undo that. She looked down. Then what do you want? I hesitated. A chance. To know her. To be something. Not her mother, maybe. But not a stranger either. The room fell silent, except for the faint ticking of the old wall clock. Claire's eyes glistened. She already loves you, she whispered. You're her favorite babysitter. Her hero in the bedtime stories. She asked me if you could come to her school play next month. My throat tightened. I'd love to. Claire nodded slowly. Let's take it one step at a time. It wasn't a grand declaration. It wasn't permission to claim back a title I'd given up years ago. But it was something. That night, I went home and dug through the box I kept in my closet, the one labeled Emily. Inside were old sonograms, hospital bracelets, a tiny knit cap she'd worn the day she was born. And then, at the bottom, the letter I'd written her the day I signed the adoption papers. My darling girl, it began, I hope someday you'll understand that this choice came from love. I hope you'll feel it, even if you never read this. I sat on the floor, tears falling freely, and for the first time in years, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, that love still had somewhere to go. It's strange, isn't it? How the past never really leaves us. It just waits, quietly, until we're brave enough to open the door. Emily's school play was about the changing seasons. She was a daffodil, her yellow costume too big for her little frame, her cheeks flushed from excitement. I sat in the second row, clutching the printed program like it was something sacred. Claire sat beside me, her arm occasionally brushing mine. We didn't speak much, but we smiled at the same things. When Emily sang her solo, Claire teared up. So did I. Afterward, when the parents gathered for cookies and juice, Emily ran straight toward me. You came, she said, wrapping her arms around my waist. I knelt down. I wouldn't miss it for the world. She beamed. Did you like my flower dance? I loved it. She tugged my hand. Come meet my friends. I looked at Claire. She gave a slight nod. That tiny gesture meant more than words ever could. I wasn't fully in her life, not yet. But I was being invited in. And this time, I was walking through the door. A few weeks later, Claire and I met for coffee at a small cafe downtown. Nothing fancy, just chipped mugs and indie music playing low. But it felt like a new beginning. I've been thinking, Claire said, stirring her latte. Emily's been asking a lot of questions. About family. About why she doesn't look like me. I held my breath. I told her she was adopted, Claire continued. And that her birth mom was someone special. I stared into my cup. And how did she take it? Claire smiled faintly. She asked if it was you. A long pause. I said yes, she added. I told her you were brave and kind. That you made the hardest choice a mother could ever make. I blinked fast, trying not to cry right there next to the salt shaker. Claire, thank you. You didn't have to. I wanted to. She reached across the table, covering my hand with hers. She should know who she came from. And how deeply she was loved. The day Emily called me Mama Emma for the first time, it was casual. Like she'd always said it. We were baking cookies. She'd gotten flour all over her nose, and I'd laughed too hard. She just looked up and said it. Mama Emma, do I get to lick the spoon? I froze. Claire, who was sitting on the couch reading, looked over and just smiled. There was no correction. No awkward silence. Just peace. Looking back now, I can't believe how far we've come. From silence and guilt to shared bedtime stories and school plays. I know I'll never get those early years back. And that hurts more than I can say. But I have this. I have now. And sometimes, that's enough. If you've walked through your own storms and came out stronger, or if you're still fighting, you're not alone. Subscribe to hear more stories from women like us, women who refuse to stay down.